There we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is good to have you with us. My name is Kyle White, and I'm the Director of Education here at Cooperatives First. I'll be facilitating our Zoom session, but also delivering our content today. I think most folks here are probably familiar with Cooperatives First, but for those who aren't, I'll just give a quick overview. We're a nonprofit that's based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. We work across all of Western Canada, the 4 Western Canadian provinces. Our mandate is to raise awareness of cooperatives and support entrepreneurs who are seeking to start cooperative businesses. Our organization is funded by Federated Cooperatives Limited on behalf of the cooperative retailing system. And because of their contributions, we're able to deliver all of our supports for free. And since being created in 2016, Cooperatives First has helped create, as of yesterday, 122 new cooperative businesses. Our most recent is in Brooks, Alberta, a health and wellness co-op. Since we've got folks joining us from, I think, all over Canada, not just Western Canada, please do take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat. Just drop your name, where you're joining from, and maybe what you do for a living or what co-op you're a part of. Drop that in the chat just so we get a sense of who all's here and the diversity of people and ideas and co-ops that we've got. And then just a few housekeeping items before we get started. During the webinar, please do remain muted. If someone unmutes and there's some background noise, I may mute you. It's not because we don't want to hear from you, but we probably don't want to hear dogs barking, babies crying, or that confidential phone call as much as we might want to eavesdrop. So please do just keep muted, just be mindful of that. If you do have any questions during the webinar, please do add them to the chat. I'll be monitoring that pretty closely. So we'll have a time for Q&A at the end of today's session, but feel free to drop something in the chat at any time. And then we are recording. So I'll be in touch by email to pass that recording along to everybody who signed up for the webinar. Okay, and then I do want to start our webinar in a good way. So I'll begin with a land acknowledgement. And I'd like to acknowledge that Cooperatives First's main office is located on Treaty 6 territory, which is the home of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. We acknowledge this land was not ceded, but that the purpose of the treaties was to ensure that the land would be shared. We're joined in this webinar by folks from all across Turtle Island, and so I invite you to acknowledge the peoples and the ancestors of whatever place it is that you call home. Indigenous people have been cooperating in these territories for thousands of years, and it is through cooperation that all of our communities will continue to thrive. All right. I'll go ahead now and share my screen. Let me pull up my slide deck so no one has to look at my cluttered desktop. Share the screen. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Everyone's good? Excellent. Go in presentation mode. There we go. All right, off to the races. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about building a member engagement strategy, the processes of recruiting, engaging, and measuring member success for co-ops. And just a quick overview of what we'll cover in today's session. We're going to start high level, and we're going to keep coming down. We're going to talk about co-op governance broadly first, just a quick refresher for everybody. We're going to talk about some important context to keep in mind when it comes to working with co-op members. We'll then talk about a member engagement strategy. What is it? What's it do? What's it contain? And then we'll dig into some of the key pieces that will inform your member engagement strategy, particularly onboarding, recruitment, and engagement of members. And then we'll round out our time together with some strategies that you can implement in your co-op or start thinking about around your board table. And I'll share some final resources if folks want to continue learning with us, ways that we can help your co-op or tools and resources you can access anytime. Okay, so let's start pretty high level and just do a quick check-in on co-op governance generally, because I always recommend to folks, let's start with the basics. always take it back whenever we're building new strategies, setting new goals, take it back and really think about the core concepts of what we're trying to get at here. And when we're talking about membership, we have to talk about governance. And governance in a cooperative really boils down to who gets to decide what. What is the role of each individual or group of actors in the organization? How do they fit together? What role do they have? What decisions do they get to make? And how do they help the organization be successful? So who gets to decide what? Members in a cooperative are very important to that. Cooperatives generally
Qu'est-ce qu'on
exist
mange?
to provide some sort of good or service or support to the membership. And so members are also the owners of the cooperative and have the highest authority in a cooperative, but their actual role and what they get to decide tends to be fairly limited in some co-ops. It's important as well to note that, and I'll show a graph here in a minute that'll highlight this, that in a cooperative, people are going to serve in multiple roles. And in those roles, they're likely going to bring different interests. And so it's important to consider who's serving in what roles, what different interests they're bringing to the table when building out the governance framework of the co-op. So how do we work with our unique individuals and owners, bearing in mind the interests that they're bringing to the table? If we're thinking about a consulting cooperative, a producer-owned cooperative, those people are likely joining the co-op to make money and support their individual businesses. So how does that influence the decisions they get to make, and what do we need to be mindful of? And again, in a cooperative, members are the owners, not to be confused with the members of Costco or Good Life Fitness. Those are some of the common questions we get at cooperatives first. A role of a member in a cooperative is as an owner, regardless of it's a 3-person worker-owned co-op or Saskatoon Co-op, which has 166,000 members. At the end of the day, we are all business owners. But of course, central to any cooperative's governance is the board of directors. Although cooperatives exist to support members and are owned by members, and members are the highest authority, legislation governing cooperatives places the board of directors at the center of decision-making. So in terms of the legal responsibility and the fiduciary duty to the cooperative, most of that's going to fall to the board of directors. And so when we're talking about member engagement, generally speaking, that process has to be led by the board of directors. It can certainly be inclusive of membership, and it can engage membership in all sorts of ways, but generally speaking, because the responsibility is assigned to the board, it's generally led by the board. Okay, and if folks have done any of our online courses, you have definitely seen this chart. This is a chart for how governance should work in an organization. Again, we have the owners in a co-op, that's the members, at the very top with the highest authority. They're going to hand off some responsibility to the board of directors, who will hand off some responsibility to management, who will hand off some responsibility to frontline staff. Again, it sets out who gets to decide what. You need to really be mindful of assigning who gets to decide what as you move down that chart. And so those higher authorities are going to empower lower authorities to act on their behalf. The members of a cooperative hand over the majority of responsibility and decision-making power to the board of directors. Once a co-op's feasible, it'll then hand over more responsibility, usually operations, to management and staff. And another thing to keep in mind, whenever there's a higher authority empowering a lower authority, it creates a relationship of accountability. Whenever a lower authority has been assigned tasks by that higher authority, they have to have some mechanism to report back. Sometimes those are legislated, like in the case of the directors reporting to members. You have to have an AGM, you have to have an annual report, and you have to report back to your membership. In other cases, it's incumbent upon the co-op and usually the board to develop the process For example, a board holding management accountable will need to create something like a performance evaluation. So that's a general outline for what governance looks like in a cooperative, how all these things fit together, and where members fall in the cooperative. So that should give us some good context on governance more generally. For membership specifically, there's a few more things we need to keep in mind as co-op leaders. And again, I assume most folks here are involved with cooperative as a board member or as a manager or staff or a governance professional. And so we've probably got a lot of these things, we already know them. But it's important to note that many of your members aren't going to be familiar with how a co-op works and what the roles of members are. So keeping this sort of context in mind is going to be really important. So again, members of the co-op hold the highest authority in the co-op, but their responsibility is usually a bit constrained. It's up to the founding members of the co-op and then the board membership to maintain the co-op's bylaws, to set out the specific qualifications and conditions for who can be a member of that co-op. Generally, one of the co-op principles is that co-ops have an open membership. That generally means anyone who can use the services of the cooperative could become a member of the co-op. In a worker co-op or a producer-owned co-op, obviously, your operational limitations can constrain that. And finally, member engagement is going to look very different from one co-op to the next. And so although I'll speak kind of generally about member engagement, it's really important that member engagement and the role that members play from a governance and an operational perspective in your co-op is going to be very tightly related to your business model. So what's going to work for a big retail co-op might not work for a procurement cooperative, for example. So be mindful of what member engagement might look like, because it will be different from co-op to co-op. And then there's some important challenges to be aware of. Certainly, anyone who's going through a member recruitment process right now, or you're trying to sell your co-op to the community and get more folks involved, you're going to run into some of these challenges. A big one right off the hop is confusion around the term member. Lots of businesses have membership programs. You can sign up to be a rewards member. You need to have a membership to shop at places like Costco. You're a gym member. The term member gets bandied around a lot. So people don't really fully understand what it means to be a member of a co-op. And that means there's some uncertainty about what their role is. As a result, they're probably not fully appreciating that they're an owner of this business, that they might need to contribute to the capital of the organization, that there might be conditions or responsibilities assigned to them when they sign up to be a member. In many cases, if there's a larger membership, it's not uncommon to see member apathy or a lack of support from the co-op's membership. Especially in competitive environments, this makes a big difference, where people don't fully recognize that for a co-op to be successful, they need to have members supporting the business. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart. And so if people don't fully understand the co-op's structure, its requirements of members, that can be a real challenge to a cooperative's sustainability. It's also important to be mindful of conflicting interests. A cooperative requires people to work together. Now, that can always seem a little bit abstract in practice, but generally, a cooperative exists to provide a greater benefit for a group of people than any one individual can get by themselves. And often what will happen, especially in cooperatives that are owned by businesses, by artisans, by farmers, by workers, there may be trade-offs that need to be considered, because what will work best for the group might not be what's best for a specific individual. And so being mindful that there could be conflicting interests when recruiting members or bringing members on board is something that co-op leaders need to be mindful of, and they should have a strategy for how to address that when it pops up. And it's also important to note that the purpose of a co-op is to serve its members. And to do that, you need to know what members need. You need to understand your market, because failing to meet a member's needs usually signals the end of a co-op. So having good communication, having open dialogue, and ensuring the co-op's purpose aligns with the membership is really a key challenge for co-op leaders. Okay. Again, if folks have any questions, do feel free, drop them in the chat. I'll check in on that chat periodically, but we will have Q&A at the end. Okay, next up, let's talk a little bit about what is a member engagement strategy. Broadly speaking, the purpose of your engagement strategy should be to put on paper in black and white what your member engagement plan is. I've worked with lots of boards over the years, and if you go around the board table and you ask folks, what are you doing on member recruitment and engagement, you might get a different answer from every person. So having a sole plan that people have had input on is well worth the investment of time. Because again, if we're all working towards one goal, we're probably going to get there a lot more quickly than if we're all doing different things. So dedicating some time as a board to building a member engagement plan is well worth the effort. And it doesn't have to be big. Some of the best member engagement strategies I've seen are 2 to 5 pages. Very straightforward. It just lists the goals, the strategies, the tactics, and it gives folks a roadmap. Your engagement plan should identify a series of goals. And I would generally say there should be at least 2 goals for every member engagement plan. There should be a goal around recruitment and bringing in new people, especially if you've got a growth minded co-op. So there should be something around new people, and there should be a goal around existing people. So 2 fairly high level goals around new people and your existing membership. A good member engagement strategy should also set targets as a good way of keeping people motivated, keeping people accountable. Having actual numbers, having firm targets, having deadlines is a great way of ensuring that you're actually advancing some of the things that you're setting out in a plan and working towards something. Your plan should also set out the processes that you'll need for success, or the specific tactics that the board and staff can build to help facilitate member recruitment and onboarding, as well as member engagement. And again, a good plan should never be set it and forget it. It should inform the actions of the board and staff. And so if your co-op is up and running and you have staff, I'd recommend that your member engagement strategy be created by the board, perhaps with your management. And then once it's finalized on the same page, create a slide deck and ensure that every staff person understands what it is we're working towards. Because again, in most cooperatives, it's your frontline staff that are going to have the most face-to-face interactions with your members. And so ensuring that everyone in the organization is apprised of what our goals are and how we're going to try and get there is time well spent. So don't just create the strategy, use the strategy. So what's in a member engagement strategy? It's up to you. Different organizations are going to need different things. They're going to have different focal points. Broadly, I would recommend something like this as a way of informing your headings or the chapters of your member engagement strategy. So again, identify your goals. What are our goals for member engagement and member onboarding and recruitment? Dedicate a little bit of time to taking stock of what we currently have in place. So when doing that, check in with your bylaws, check in with the documents or processes that you've already got in place, because having a good sense of what that looks like and what that member experience looks like will help inform whether or not changes are going to be part of the things that you work on, or if there's new procedures that you need to develop to respond to gaps in your recruitment strategy. Then set out what your plan is, or what your actual strategy is, to increase member recruitment, if that's a goal. If you're a worker-owned co-op, and you've got your 20 members and you can't hire any more, well, you probably don't need a recruitment plan. But if you do, identify what your plan or strategy is to get new members involved. Is it making it easier for people to sign up? Is it putting in some legwork and actually knocking on doors and encouraging people to sign up to our new co-op? Is it having membership drives and town hall meetings? What's the plan for increasing member engagement? Similarly, when it comes to engaging current members, what have we got in place and what new things could we try to better engage our members? I was working with a co-op over the summer and they realized we just need to be more present in our community. So let's host some barbecues. Let's have member events at each of our locations, and let's let people know they're an owner, that this co-op is theirs, it's for them, and try and engage people in the organization that way. And once you've got kind of a high level plan and some strategy to inform what you're going to do, identify the individual pieces of what that looks like, the tactics, the deliverables, and the things that can be evaluated. Set out, how many emails you're going to send out, how many town hall meetings you're going to host, what our target is for the number of people we're going to get in front of. Those sorts of things. How many newsletter signups are we going to try and work towards, and how are we going to achieve that? Set out some targets and some goals that, again, your board, your staff can divvy up, can work into their work plans, and then can be evaluated on the back end. So try and pin down things that you can tangibly work towards in your member engagement plan. Okay. And so, again, generally this is led by your board of directors. So to kind of get you started on thinking about membership and thinking about new members and recruiting folks, here's some questions I would say to start with. In maybe a facilitated session or a good board discussion, make sure you take some good notes and ask yourselves, what is the role of members in our co-op? From an ideal perspective, what would a member do and look like and decide, and how would they engage with our business in a perfect world that helps our co-op be successful? What's the role of members? What obligations do members then have to the co-op? Do they know that? Are they fulfilling them? And how do we help people fulfill those obligations to help the co-op be successful? On the flip side, what obligations does the co-op have to members? Are we delivering on that? Are we doing as good a job as we could possibly do? Are we aiming too low? Should we be helping members more? And all of that should lead into, what value does the co-op provide to members? Again, membership and member engagement has to be tied to the cooperative's business model. So think about what your value proposition is, and is there alignment between that value proposition and the needs of your membership? So just some questions to get you thinking, to maybe inspire some discussion around the board table. Okay, so we've kind of talked about some high-level stuff, some contextual things, and then what actually might go into a member engagement strategy. For this next section, we'll kind of dive into the various components of member engagement, just to unpack what these things are, things to consider when you're working on recruitment versus onboarding versus engagement. Yeah, just a bit of an intro here. If folks have done our online co-op professionals course, some of this might sound a little bit familiar. We do deal with a bit of this throughout that course, but it's also never good to check back, never harmful to check back in on some of these things. So the key components that we're going to talk about are member outreach, onboarding, and engagement. Three pretty distinct processes when it comes to bringing members into a co-op. And I think, again, should inform your member engagement strategy separately. So starting with outreach. And again, for all these things, I'm probably going to say start with the bylaws. Because again, your bylaws are going to set out what the qualifications and conditions of membership are, and it's going to inform who can be a member of your cooperative. So start with your bylaws and then identify who your prospective members are. For at least half of the co-ops we work with, membership is as open as possible. Anyone can be a member as long as they can use the services. Most of the co-ops we work with are community owned is kind of their approach. And so really the world's your oyster. You can really cater your messaging, your pitch, and who you shoulder tap to be the member as needed. And that's something that I would recommend founders of co-ops do, is put in some time and prepare an actual pitch or a key message for your prospective members. What does it mean to be a member of this co-op? What's the value to you as your member intrinsically, but also altruistically? What benefit will you bring to your community, to society, to the work that we do by being a part of this co-op? And by being a part, you can make a real difference by being one of the owners, by supporting our work, by contributing in this way. What's that pitch? What makes the most sense for your co-op and for your members to understand? And once you've got that pitch pinned down, and you know what that key message is that you want to get across to prospective members, identify what channels or lines of communication or sites are going to work best to get in front of people. Times are changing, and so we can't lean on Facebook as much as we used to. We can't lean on the community bulletin board maybe as much as we used to. And so be mindful of what are the realities associated with people accessing information in your community. How do people learn about events, activities, and new opportunities? And can you market your co-op through those same channels? In many cases, that might be shoulder tapping people, but it might also be putting a little bit of money, maybe $200 into a Facebook ad for a specific geographic region. Have a discussion about what's the best way to get in front of your intended audience, your prospective members. And once you've built out that outreach process, then you need to develop the back end of things. You need to build out the onboarding process so that when someone takes you up on your offer and likes what they hear, you're ready to bring them on into the co-op as a member. So again, when it comes to member onboarding, start with the bylaws. Do a quick check-in on your bylaws. What are the things people need to do or fulfill to become a member of the co-op? And again, many of these are legislated. To join a member, you have to make some sort of application that echoes the voluntary membership component of every co-op. So generally, there has to be some way to apply to be a member. So maybe you need a member form. Generally, there's some sort of fee or payment for shares in a cooperative. If you're in a worker cooperative, you may have to perform X number of hours of work before you can apply for membership. If you're in a producer-owned cooperative, you may need to contribute X amount of product before you can become a member of a cooperative. Or you may need to uphold X number of volunteer hours to help support the work of the co-op. So many of those things will be in your bylaws. So check there and make sure that when you're communicating with folks, you can tell them exactly what it looks like to become a member of the co-op. And so identify those steps, identify the requirements, and then create the tools that you need to support all of that. I think most folks here are going to be familiar with our resource, the Co-op Creator, just coopcreator.ca. that's going to have a lot of templates that'll help with this step. In particular, we've got a template member application or agreement. You can certainly use that to then pour it into a Google form, for example. I've just noticed someone in the comments said they use Google Forms all the time for this stuff. Whatever works, use it. So we have a template member agreement or application form. You'll need some way of keeping track of your members. Generally, that's called a membership registry. You need to keep track of who your members are, their contact information, and whether or not they've fulfilled their obligations to the co-op, even if that's just paying a small fee. And again, doesn't have to be fancy. Your membership registry could simply be a spreadsheet on a shared drive. As long as you've got some way for the board and management to keep track of who's a member of the co-op, that's all you need. In some provinces, like British Columbia, you'll need to issue share certificates if someone's making payment for shares. We do have a template for that if you need one. But you may also want to have some sort of receipt system to clarify that someone's paid their dues to a co-op. And then it's up to you what else you create or provide. And the different types of onboarding information you'll provide really depends on what you need members to know and understand to participate in your co-op. If anyone's joined any of the big consumer-owned cooperatives in Western Canada, that process is a little light, I would say, in information. You do get a good package, and there is opportunity to ask questions, and you get a good newsletter. But again, the level of engagement expected of members is a bit lower. If we think about a worker-owned co-op or a producer-owned co-op where there's only, say, 10, 15, 20 people who work together, and their participation is going to determine the success of the co-op, well, you're probably going to want to dedicate a little bit more time and effort and training to ensuring folks understand what it means to be a member and how they can participate and be successful. So again, think about how involved your members need to be and what information they need to be a successful member and contribute to the co-op. And I make the point here because for many co-ops, that onboarding process where someone's literally, signing up for the co-op to be a part of this, to support it, that's a pretty unique opportunity. You've got them when they're most interested and most supportive, and so why not take advantage of that situation to provide that education? So in whatever documents you create and whatever processes you create, or training you implement, make sure that you're communicating those key messages to the membership, that they understand the purpose of the co-op, that they understand what their role specifically means in the cooperative as a member, what their rights are, what their responsibilities and obligations are, and what success looks like. And although the onboarding process is maybe the best time to communicate that, it doesn't have to be a one-off. I would 100% recommend having meetups or some sort of ongoing communications forum. That could certainly be a Discord channel, a group chat, a Slack account, whatever works best. Consider some way of keeping people apprised of what's going on at the co-op and engaged for the long term. Some of the co-ops I work with have started doing new member meetups. So once they bring on, say, another 10, 15, 20 people, they like send an invitation, hey, let's get together, come meet some of your board members, come meet some of the staff, and we'll do a quick, a 1 hour, here's what the co-op is, what it does, ask some questions, learn some things, and have a beer or something. Other co-ops have more extensive mentorship programs, where, especially if it's a worker-owned co-op, where again, people are highly invested in the business. There might be more formal programs that pair senior members with junior members to help people get integrated and get familiar with the processes. And for all of these things, be mindful of what is and isn't working, and don't be afraid to ask people about their experience. One of the things I do really appreciate about the cooperative retailing system is they're very attentive to the data. And so once I joined our co-op here a number of years ago, there was a member feedback survey. And so consider doing that for your co-op. Ask people what the engagement and onboarding process felt like. Did you have lingering questions? Are there questions you still have now? Try and get ahead of some of that information and integrate that into your process as your co-op grows. Okay, let's take a bit of a break from kind of the jargony stuff with a bit of a story. Last year, we had the pleasure of working with some really concerned folks in the town of Souk. Souk is a resort town, bedroom community just outside of Victoria, BC. And like many small towns, the coffee shop is an absolute hub for get-togethers, for parties, and it's where things happen. And so a number of folks in town were just devastated when they learned on Facebook that the coffee shop was going to close because it couldn't find a buyer. The owner wanted to move on. No one was willing to buy it. And so it was going to close up the doors. So naturally, folks couldn't let that happen. They struck a steering committee, those lovely people whose back of the heads we can see, and they said, nope, we've got to make this work. We started working with them to create the Souk Community Investment Cooperative, and their member outreach and onboarding strategy was just phenomenal. It's a real testament to meeting people where they're at. They initially called some town hall meetings to make sure that there was sufficient community interest in a community-owned store or a community-owned coffee shop, and that a community-owned approach is what would work best for this situation, rather than 2 or 3 people buying it themselves. And once they had confirmation that that was the case, then, well, the best possible way of recruiting dedicated coffee drinkers was at the coffee shop. And so they set up shop, they set up a table, an information booth at the cafe, and as people came in, said, hey, the coffee shop's closing. Here's what we're doing about it. Here's how you can literally contribute to keeping the doors open. Can we sign you up for buying a $500 share? Can we sign you up for buying at least a $30 membership? So meeting people right where they're at, communicating exactly what you're doing, how they can get involved, and what membership and investment in the co-op looks like. And it worked. Within, I think, 6 weeks, they raised several $100,000 and they bought the coffee shop. It's now called Cafe Vicino. I highly recommend checking it out. Okay, once your co-op is up and running, once you've got a base of membership, it's important to not only think about outreach and onboarding, but also engagement. Once your co-op is doing the things, how do members need to engage with your co-op for it to be successful? And broadly speaking, there's 2 types of engagement that you really need to be considerate of here. You need to be mindful of how members engage with the co-op financially, in terms of how they contribute to the capital of the co-op, but also how they use the co-op economically. Are they buying things from the co-op? Are they working for the co-op? Are they selling product to the co-op? How are they using the co-op from a financial perspective? And second, how do people engage with the co-op from an organizational perspective? So how do they contribute to the governance of the co-op? How do they get involved with their co-op? And how do they make sure the co-op works on the back end? And underlying all of that, you've got to be mindful of your co-op's business model, because what that looks like is going to differ quite a bit from a co-op with 100,000 members to one with 10 members. So from an organizational perspective, really be mindful that how do we want people to make decisions in our cooperative? Thinking back to our definition of governance, who gets to decide what? What does decision-making look like for our members? If you've got, say, 150,000 members, you probably don't need members to be making that many decisions. And most co-ops that are larger are going to default to members making decisions at the annual meeting or on special resolutions that make changes to the co-op. That's probably going to be the extent of their organizational engagement. For slightly smaller co-ops or really small co-ops, that organizational engagement is going to be imperative. Because again, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where people don't understand how the co-op works, they don't understand their role as members, and you've got no one to run for the board of directors. That's how co-ops fall apart, even if they are financially healthy. So ensuring people understand their role from a governance and organizational perspective is just as important as the financial perspective. But again, check in on your business model and make sure you're informing it based on your own unique operating strengths. Okay. And so when it comes to engaging your members, there's a few things we've learned over the years. There's a few things other co-ops have tried. And so there's a few tips I'll pass along on enhancing that member engagement. The number one thing that's the easiest to do is do something else. You have to engage your members at the annual meeting. So naturally, if you want to engage them a little bit more, do anything else. Hold a semi-annual meeting. Hold a member meetup. Hold new member meetups. Have some way for folks to get in touch with the co-op, ask their questions, and feel heard and engaged outside of just the AGM. Our local co-op has started doing town halls. It's a great way. Again, you come out, you get your voice heard, and you get the information you want as a member. Have some sort of ongoing communication. The easiest way to do this is just at least have a newsletter. So at least once a month, once a week, every once in a while, people understand what's happening at the co-op. And that's a great way as well to work in messaging that you need members to understand. Host member meetups. Lots of co-ops that I've been working with over the summer, we're doing barbecues. It's an easy way to show members there's some appreciation for them, as well as to get some face time, answer their questions, get some feedback on processes, and again, create that sense of a community that often underpins a co-op. And don't be afraid of feedback. Ask people what's working, what isn't working. Tools like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms are completely free, relatively speaking. Use those tools to get some feedback from your members. What's your membership experience like? What would you like to see your co-op doing? How would you like to participate? Get some data and figure out how the co-op can best represent and respond to its members. And we also think of, again, if you want to increase member engagement, here's some tips, 5 ways that you can do it. In real time, 5 ways you can do it. Number 1, incentivize engagement. If you're asking people to participate and give their time to the co-op, offer some sort of incentive. Offer a discount on product. Give a slight discount on your rent. A lot of housing cooperatives, for example, if people serve on committees, if they serve on the board, they can see a slight decrease in their rent if they're instead of being compensated. If you're in a worker cooperative, for example, offer compensation for serving on the board or on committees. Incentivize that engagement. Second tip, create community. Most cooperatives are community-minded people coming together to solve a problem. Run with that. We all share a common goal. We all share a common purpose. Help facilitate that community. Use messaging that reflects that. Use channels for communication that reflects that. Have a group chat, have a Facebook page, have a Facebook group. Help facilitate discussion amongst people. And again, as the co-op's leaders, lead that process. Third tip, be relevant. This is where feedback comes in really handy. Ask your members what's working, what isn't working, respond to that, and pay attention to current trends. Doing webinars and courses and things like that is a great way of learning what other co-ops are doing, what's working, what's changing, what are some new faux pas to avoid. But be relevant, be mindful of how things are changing in your community and in your industry, so that your co-op can keep up, keep pace, and meet people where they're at with the expectations that they're bringing to the table. Fourth good tip, if possible, wherever possible, try and increase diversity. Especially in larger co-ops, especially in competitive environments, people are going to look for themselves in the organizations they support. And so some of the most important advice I could give to bigger co-ops especially is try to facilitate diversity amongst your frontline staff, amongst your leadership teams, and amongst your board of directors. Not only does diversity look good and help people feel invited and included, it usually yields better results from a governance and a performance perspective. Lots of studies show that more diverse organizations tend to make better decisions and be more sustainable. And finally, if you want to increase engagement, just do it. Do something. We've given lots of tips. There's lots of blogs and tools and resources you can find if you search for member engagement. Try something out. It never hurts to try something to see if it works, but just do something. Lots of organizations fall into the analysis paralysis of talking about how to do something or how to engage the youth is one I hear quite a bit. Just try something. Try something, try it out. You might be surprised with the results. And so let's finish off with just a few more strategies, a few more tips that you can take away, discuss with your board, and try some things out. So if you really want to enhance member engagement, think about those opportunities, those potential touch points to provide education for your members. Figure out the different channels that'll work, and then create the tools or resources to do that effectively. I mentioned earlier, your frontline staff are probably the people who are going to have the most face time with your membership. And so use your staff, educate the staff to help catalyze that message. Get that information out there at the pumps, at the till, at whatever it is your members engage with. Figure out how to best use all the people in your organization to move that message out there. A big tip we give to establish co-ops is try to create an idea-friendly organization. Provide as many channels and avenues as possible for members to get information into the co-op. That's going to look very different depending on your operating model, but it could certainly be a Discord, a Slack, a Teams. It could be a message box at the till in your co-op. It could be a survey in newsletters that you send out. Let people know that you're open to hearing from them, that you want to hear from them, and that as a member, their voice matters, their opinion matters. So create that idea-friendly organization that's open to hearing from people. And again, you might be surprised with the impact. And as always, on all these things, seek out feedback. I've talked about that a lot already. And then beyond membership and for governance more broadly, there's lots of things we could do to enhance our co-op's governance. One of the big pieces of advice I give to all co-ops is do more than the minimum. Even if you just start at the AGM, the annual report you give to your members only needs to contain the balance sheet and the operating statement. Do more than the minimum. Let people know what's happening at the co-op. Give a president's message, give a committee report. Let people know what's happening at the co-op and how they can get involved. Add that into your member onboarding process. Instead of just giving people, a coupon and a handout about what it means to be a member, have a session. Let people learn about the co-op. Have a short video or something that people can watch to understand what it means to be a co-op member. Just do more than the minimum. And again, the return is probably going to be there on your investment. Evaluate your processes. Regardless of if it's membership or governance or reporting or staff accountability, always check in on your processes. Anything that you build or put into place, I would recommend revisiting at least every 2 years. Just check back in on the systems that you've built and the things that you put in place just to make sure it's getting the intended results. Or are there any hiccups? Or is there user experience issues? what are things looking like when they're actually working? Are things falling through the cracks or are things going smoothly? Check in at least every 2 years, I would say. Just like with your bylaws, you shouldn't just set it and forget it. Check in on it, make sure it's working and delivering you the results. Wherever possible, provide training opportunities. And that's important for both the staff, for all the staff, the management, the board, the members. Understand what knowledge people are bringing to the table and where they might be deficient. It's not uncommon for staff of co-ops to have never worked for a co-op before. So be mindful of the types of training you can provide people to help them excel in that sort of environment. It's very common that our people are part of a member of a co-op that's probably their first time joining a cooperative that isn't a credit union or a really big co-op. So be mindful of communicating what it means to be a member. And as I mentioned, seek feedback, facilitate diversity. It not only helps your member engagement process, it's going to have huge effects throughout your co-op's governance more broadly. Okay, and if you are interested in continuing learning with Cooperatives First, we've got lots of tools and resources and just cool stuff that you can check out to learn more about this, read more about this, and get new ideas. This link should take you, I believe, to one of our newsletters for co-op leaders. We provide quarterly content curated for co-op leaders for professional development, blogs, podcasts, and cool ideas that are of interest for co-op board members, staff, and managers and members. If you check out the Cooperatives First site, you'll see lots of blogs and podcasts, some great co-op stories. And if you want more technical things, do check out the Co-op Creator, just coopcreator.ca for lots of tools, templates, and different resources you might need for moving your co-op forward. If you want to keep on learning with Cooperatives First, and member engagement and governance is an area of interest for you, I would definitely recommend checking out our Intro to Co-ops course. I believe this QR code will link you to our Co-op Professionals course, which walks you through how the membership, staff, and board of a cooperative all come together to help make a cooperative successful. If you're in the startup stage of starting a cooperative, then I'd also recommend checking out our Co-op Entrepreneurs course. It walks you through right from the early stages to incorporating, building out your governance model, putting a business model in place. We've also got our online Good Governance Matters course, which provides a great introduction to the foundations of cooperative governance. And for those more established co-ops, you might also be interested in our Indigenous Awareness for Co-op Leaders course for co-ops that want to recognize how they can play more of a role in reconciliation and learn about Canada's Indigenous peoples. And if you're still in the startup stage of your cooperative and want to do a check-in on your governance and ensure that your board is doing what they need to be doing, then I'd recommend getting in touch with me about a board basics workshop. That's a support that we provide, and all these supports we provide for free. So that will do it for me. If we've got any questions, I'm more than happy to chat. But thank you all for joining. This just links you to our Co-op Leaders newsletter for anyone that wants to sign up. So yeah, any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat or give a good wave or raise a hand and ask away. No questions yet, just thank yous in the chat, which I appreciate. Thank y'all. Oh, Peter, go ahead.
When is the next webinar coming up?
We do have a webinar coming up at the end of October, but it's focused on starting childcare cooperatives in Manitoba. In November, we don't have the sign up created yet, but if you follow our newsletter or anything like that, you'll see the updates. In November, we should have a webinar focused on, I think, succession planning, on raising money through investments, and another one about working with financial institutions. So we should have more coming up. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Lacey in the chat. Any suggestions for helping folks, especially founders or legacy leaders, with overcoming the bias and pain of sunk costs and pivoting based on member needs or feedback? Boy, uh, I mean, other than being really frank and tough with people, it's a hard one. Lots of organizations are going to suffer from this, where people who helped set up the co-op aren't going to want to let go. And that can really hold co-ops back and keep them from pivoting or meeting new people where they're at or responding to new needs. Um, I would say try and facilitate a process where everyone at least feels heard and can contribute. But then at the end of the day, explain the decisions that you make. Um, Communication is key, I think, to making sure no one feels, particularly hard done by in the co-op. But at the end of the day, it usually falls to the board of directors and management to make a call on what's going to be best for everybody, regardless of if it pisses people off. So, I mean, yeah, hear people out, explain your rationale, but make the decision that's going to work best for everybody. Question from Colleen. Do you have a way to encourage members to show up to AGM meetings? Oh, it depends. The promise of food, helps sometimes. Having prize draws are pretty good. Um, but once co-ops reach a certain size, the likelihood of getting more than 5% of your membership out is real hard. I mean, in Saskatoon, we've got 160,000 members. There's no way, you're going to get 1%, for example. Or Mountain Equipment Co-op before it demutualized, had 4.5 million members. I would say figure out what you need from members at the AGM, and let that really inform the tactics you use. It is ideal for more people to come out and support their co-op and receive information, but do bear in mind that it might not be essential for everyone to show up for every co-op. Yeah, in those cases, I would, check in on what does organizational membership need to look like for the co-op to be successful. If it is at the AGM, then put some money behind advertising, get communications out to people, try new channels for communicating with folks. But if people aren't showing up to the AGM, it's probably indicative that they don't need to be there. And so maybe look for other ways of engaging them. Okay, question from Sheila. Can engagement leading to the first AGM include pre-info on questions posed to provide more streamlining on questions or topics at the AGM? It certainly could. Lots of cooperatives will give an information package ahead of time, and that could include your annual report, as well as any special resolutions or anything like that. And many cooperatives, especially at their first AGM, if they get a lot of lead time, will also have facilitated sessions, training opportunities, or opportunities for feedback for folks to give information to the founding members and to the board. So yeah, you could certainly give all that information to folks ahead of time. Even having a video or some sort of communication with folks ahead of time that explains what's expected and what we're going to cover, that goes a long way too, I would say, so that when people arrive, they're ready to participate and you can kind of get more done. Question from Kemi. How do we reduce bias with diversity? Oh, I would maybe just rephrase that. We can reduce bias with diversity. um, yeah, it's one of these things that a lot of co-ops struggle with. And the realities of rural Western Canada are what they are. It's not the most diverse place. But I would say for any co-op that wants to address diversity or recognizes the need to address diversity, you've got to be really intentional about it. I was on a committee recently, and at the end of a meeting, we recognized, oh, hey, we're all white guys. We might miss something. we're not representative of our community. Respectively, let's all look in our own organizations and try and put different people forward so that we look a little bit more like the community we serve. Boards need to make that same decision. And so striking recruitment committees, creating policies around recruitment and HR, and setting goals for yourself, like, having X number of your leadership team, representing visible minorities or women or what have you. Those are things that boards can work towards, but you've got to recognize that it takes effort and intentionality to actually work on making a more diverse co-op. And at the end of the day, co-ops use a democratic system. And so at the end of the day, you do have to take things to member votes. So control the parts of the process you can. Try and influence things and communicate what you're doing as best as you can. But at the end of the day, set the target and yeah, hope for the best. Excellent. Question from someone on an iPhone. How do you see AI contributing to co-op development, like bylaws or structure? Great question. If you check out the Co-op Creator, you may find a tool or two where the draft was created with AI. I wouldn't recommend going with that draft as the final product, but if you're creating a membership agreement, a terms of service, a policy for how to handle financial transactions, it doesn't hurt to start with AI because it's going to pull from all sorts of different sources and put things in place. And that's not a bad starting point. It's pretty intimidating, I would say, to create policies and procedures and manuals, especially if you're not, trained in that area. So yeah, start with AI as a way of getting at least a first draft in place. And then it gives you something to work with then as a board or as a team. Our organization does provide some guidance on things to consider in a whole bunch of different policies or procedures or areas of work. So consulting that, using AI, and then coming back and having a bit of a discussion that way might be a good way, I think, of getting towards a final draft for any of these things that you need to create. Oh, good tip here from Kemi. We had a dinner at our AGM for a subsidized amount donated to charity, and more people showed up. Yeah. I mean, yeah, have something at your AGM that people want to get involved with and participate with, and that's a good way to get people more engaged and excited. Okay, I think that's all the questions that were in the chat. Any other questions from folks before we wrap up our time together today? Awesome. And just to echo Lacey's comment, happy co-op week, everybody. I'll be in touch with everyone next week with a copy of today's recording. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us at Cooperatives First. But yeah, have a wonderful day, and thanks for coming out today, folks. Take care.
Thanks, Kyle. It was great. See you later.
You take